The man who asked for no attention. It was a rainy Tuesday in Mountain View, the kind of day that made people walk a little faster, heads bent low, trying to stay dry. The streets glistened like silver ribbons under the soft drizzle, and the air smelled of wet asphalt and distant coffee. Inside a small family-owned Indian restaurant tucked between a dry cleaner and a hardware store, the mood was warm and buzzing. It wasn't fancy, no sleek decor, no gourmet price tags, just good food, heartfelt service, and a bell that rang every time the door opened. That day, no one noticed the man who walked in around noon. He looked ordinary. He wore a plain gray hoodie, the kind you'd see on a college kid pulling an all-nighter. His jeans were slightly faded, and his sneakers had the kind of quiet wear that told stories of long walks and real-life errands. His face was calm, unbothered, like he had practiced stillness for years. He waited patiently for a table, smiled gently at the hostess, and asked, "Is it okay if I sit near the kitchen?" The hostess nodded. "Of course, sir. That's usually for staff, but it's empty now." He thanked her quietly and took his seat, folding his hands on the table, as if he didn't want to take up too much space. No one in the restaurant seemed to recognize him. The servers walked by with plates of buttered chicken and garlic naan, unaware that the man watching them so closely had once helped build the software in their pockets. He didn't flash his name or drop hints. He didn't even pull out a phone. The server assigned to him was a 19-year-old named Reema. She was working part-time to save money for community college. Tired from pulling doubles all week and worried sick about her mother's medical bills, she approached the table, notebook in hand, eyes half closed from sleep deprivation. "Hello, sir," she mumbled. "What can I get you today?" He smiled again, and it wasn't just polite. It was warm, full of something deeper, something that felt like he truly saw her. "I'll take whatever you recommend," he said, gently. "And some tea." "I'm in no hurry." Reema blinked, unsure how to respond. Most customers barked orders. Some didn't even make eye contact. This man, who spoke with the softness of someone raised in a household of respect, made her pause. Still, she nodded and went to the kitchen. As she walked away, he watched her, not in a creepy way, not like he was analyzing her for mistakes. It was more like he was studying the weight she carried, the tired curve of her shoulders, the way she moved like she was underwater. He knew that look. He had worn it once, too, because Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, hadn't always worn tailored suits and sat in meetings with world leaders. Once, long ago, he had stood in long food lines, shared one textbook between 3 classmates, and watched his parents make impossible choices with kindness and grace. He knew the hunger behind people's smiles, and in that tiny restaurant, he felt something stir. What Reema didn't know was that this visit wasn't random. Tonight's before, Sundar had read a story online. Someone had posted about a server in Mountain View who paid for a customer's meal out of her own pocket because the man had lost his wallet and looked too embarrassed to admit he was hungry. That someone was Reema. No one knew her name, and the post didn't go viral, but it reached Sundar quietly, like a whisper. He knew that kind of kindness didn't come from comfort. It came from experience, and so, curious and moved, he decided to meet her, not by calling the restaurant or setting up a corporate event, just by walking in like a regular customer. When Reema brought his food, he asked her questions, not the kind you expect from strangers. He asked how long she'd been working there, whether she enjoyed cooking, if her family lived nearby. At first, she answered cautiously, but something about him felt safe. Maybe it was the way he listened, like her words mattered, or maybe it was the rare feeling of being seen, really seen, by someone who didn't expect anything in return. As their conversation unfolded, the manager of the restaurant noticed. Amar Khanna had owned the place for over 30 years. He was gruff, mostly grumpy, but sharp. When he spotted the man sitting near the kitchen, something about him seemed familiar. He stepped out from behind the counter, wiping his hands on a towel, squinting at the customer. Then he froze, not dramatically, not in a way anyone else noticed. Just a small, stunned breath. "No way," he whispered. He didn't say anything, not yet. He respected privacy. But as he stood there, watching Sundar chat with Reema, the puzzle pieces in his mind started to click. Meanwhile, Reema had begun to feel strange. The man asked about her dreams, not in a cheesy, motivational speaker way, but in a quiet, serious tone that made her pause. "If you had 1 year," he asked, "no bills, No pressure, just time. What would you do? She laughed a little. I'd probably sleep first. Then maybe I'd study design. Make things that help people. I like the idea of building something real. He nodded slowly, as if he was filing that away. You should do that, he said. The world needs people like you. She blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, well, dreams are expensive. He didn't argue. He just nodded again, looking down at his cup of tea. The rain outside had picked up, tapping against the windows like a soft drumbeat. The restaurant had thinned out. Lunch rush was over. Then something strange happened. The man stood up, thanked Reema, and walked over to the counter. He asked to pay in cash. When Kenna handed him the receipt, Sundar leaned in and whispered something that made the old man's eyes widen. He looked at Sundar, then at Reema, then back again. Are you sure? He asked. Sundar just nodded. A minute later, he walked out of the restaurant, disappearing into the rainy street like he'd never been there. Reema didn't know anything was different. Not yet. But the next day, everything changed, and when she found out what Sundar had done, it would shake her world to the core. The letter behind the counter. Next morning, the sky was clearer, as if the storm had washed away something heavy. Sunlight slipped through the windows of the restaurant, casting long golden streaks across the tables. Reema arrived 10 minutes early, wearing the same black sneakers she wore every shift. Still a little worn down, but carrying something different in her walk, something like curiosity. She couldn't stop thinking about the man from yesterday. He wasn't just kind. He was intentional. The way he had spoken, the way he listened, it stayed with her. Like a song you don't remember the name of but can't stop humming. Kenna was already behind the counter when she arrived, wiping down the coffee machine. That wasn't unusual. What was strange, though, was the way he looked at her when she walked in. Not annoyed, not hurried. There was something almost gentle in his face, like he was holding back a secret. You're early, he said. Couldn't sleep, she replied. Weird dreams. He nodded but didn't press. Instead, he reached under the counter and pulled out a small envelope. It was cream-colored, plain, sealed. He held it out toward her with both hands, like it was something sacred. This came, and after you left, he said. It's for you. Reema raised an eyebrow. From who? He didn't answer, just tilted his head slightly. She took the envelope, feeling the weight of it, not just the paper, but something else, something unspoken. Her name was handwritten on the front in neat, careful letters. Inside was a letter and a check. She unfolded the note first. The handwriting was steady, elegant, but simple. It read, kindness is rare, and when it shows up unannounced, it deserves to be nurtured, not ignored. I saw your heart. I saw your struggle. I've been there. This is not a gift. It's a bridge. Use it to reach something bigger. I'll be watching, not to judge but to cheer you on. A friend. Her hand started to tremble. She looked down at the check. $10,000. She gasped so loudly that the co-workers in the kitchen poked their heads out. She stared at the amount again, then back at the letter, then at Mr. Kenna. What is this? Is this real? It's very real, he said. You served someone yesterday who's not exactly a regular guy. But who? Why me? Kenna leaned in, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret from the past. Do you know who Sundar Pichai is? She blinked. The Google guy. That was him. Reema froze, the words not making sense at first. Her mind replayed the quiet man in the hoodie, the way he had asked questions, the way he had watched everything, listened so carefully, that gentle smile, the tea, the rain. It all clicked at once. She had served lunch to one of the most powerful men in tech, and he hadn't said a word about who he was. Her breath caught. But why would he? Because, Mr. Kenna said, you didn't treat him like he was important. You treated him like he was human. Reema sat down on one of the stools, the check still in her hand. It didn't feel real. Nothing about the moment did. This wasn't something that happened to girls like her, girls who worked overtime to pay bills, girls who gave away free meals and hoped no one would notice the coins missing from the tip jar. It was too much, and yet it had happened. But this wasn't the end. Not even close. Over the next week, strange things began to happen. A woman from a local community college came into the restaurant, ordered lunch, and casually mentioned a new scholarship program for design students. One that didn't require perfect grades, just heart and drive. A man with a startup offered free coding workshops on weekends. No application, no fees. Just a small flyer pinned to the bulletin board near the restrooms. Reema started to wonder, was this a coincidence, or was someone leaving breadcrumbs, quietly placing opportunities in her path like puzzle pieces? She couldn't be sure. But something told her Sundar wasn't done. Then a customer came in who changed everything. He wasn't anyone important, not in the traditional sense, just an older man, gray beard, kind eyes. He sat at her table and asked for tea. When she brought it, he looked at her and said, "You remind me of someone I knew, a girl who thought small things didn't matter, but they did. They changed everything." She smiled politely, unsure how to respond, but before he left, he slid a folded napkin across the table. She waited until he was gone to open it. Written in the same handwriting as the first note were 6 words. "It's your turn to build bridges." Her chest tightened. The room felt still. She looked out the window, half expecting to see Sundar on the street again, but he wasn't there, just traffic and trees. That night, she went home and looked at the check again. She could pay rent, fix the heater, cover her mom's medication, but more than anything, she could begin. She didn't know where it would lead, didn't know what Sundar expected, if anything. But the message was clear. Kindness wasn't just something you gave, it was something you passed on, and someone was watching. The echo of small beginnings. The time to weeks had passed. The buzz inside the restaurant had changed. It wasn't just the usual clatter of plates or the casual conversations about weekend plans. There was something different now, like the walls themselves were listening, like the air had been stirred by an invisible hand. And in the middle of it all, Reema found herself walking with a new kind of weight, not heavy, but purposeful, like she had been handed a torch, and now the flame danced quietly behind her eyes. She hadn't told anyone about the check, not even her mother, who had enough to worry about already. Instead, she opened a small savings account, the kind with no monthly fee and no fanfare. Every time she saw the balance, she didn't think about shopping or vacations. She thought about potential, about how a quiet man in a hoodie had shown her what was possible when someone believed in you, without asking anything in return. But just as she started to dream bigger, the real test arrived, not in the form of a challenge, but a choice. On a slow Monday afternoon, a boy walked into the restaurant, maybe 10 or 11, skin like polished bronze, hair flattened by the rain. He wore a school uniform, but it was wrinkled and too big for him. He walked straight to the counter, hands tucked into his sleeves, and asked if he could use the restroom. Reema nodded. He didn't go. He just stood there, eyes darting around the tables like he was looking for someone who hadn't come. She approached him gently. "You okay?" He hesitated, then whispered, "My dad was supposed to meet me here. I think he forgot." It hit her in the chest, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. Forgotten children didn't cry loudly. They just waited quietly, shrinking into corners. She knew the feeling all too well. "Have you eaten?" she asked. He shook his head. She led him to the corner table, the one near the kitchen, the same seat Sundar had taken. It felt almost poetic. She brought him a small plate of food and a mango lassi, not asking for money, not asking questions. He ate slowly, trying not to look grateful. And that's when something happened that sent a chill down her spine. He pulled a crumpled napkin from his pocket, flattened it, and placed it on the table beside him. Written on it in shaky handwriting were the words, "Build bridges, not walls." Reema froze. She reached out and touched the napkin like it might vanish. The boy looked up, confused. "A man gave it to me outside," he said it was for someone inside. She looked toward the window. The street was empty. It was him, again, always, just out of reach, like a shadow that knew how to stay unseen. Sundar wasn't showing off. He was showing up in ways that left ripples instead of footprints. That night, Reema sat at her desk with the napkin beside her and opened her laptop. She stared at the screen for a long time before typing the name of the local community college. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. Then, with a single deep breath, she clicked apply. The next morning, she found a sticky note on her locker at the restaurant. She recognized the handwriting immediately. "Progress is made in small steps, but they add up. Keep walking." No one saw who left it. No one ever did. Meanwhile, Kenna had begun to act differently, too. He wasn't the same grumpy manager anymore. He had started offering discounts to students, hiring more part-timers. Even let his staff suggest changes to the menu. He didn't say why, but Reema knew. It was like Sundar had lit a match, and now everyone was warming their hands on the fire. But not all changes came with warmth. Out one night, just before closing, a woman stormed into the restaurant. She was tall, sharply dressed, and clearly in a hurry. She marched straight up to the counter and demanded to speak to Reema. "You gave food to my son without calling me," she snapped. "Do you even know how dangerous that is?" Reema stood, frozen. The boy's mother, she hadn't expected this, hadn't prepared for it. "He said you didn't show up," Reema said carefully. "He was alone. He looked hungry." The woman crossed her arms. "You think that gives you the right to step in? You think you know what's best for my child?" The words hit hard. They weren't wrong, but they weren't entirely fair either. "I didn't want to overstep," Reema said, her voice quiet. "I just didn't want him to feel invisible." Something in the woman's face shifted, just slightly. The rage didn't vanish, it softened, like she saw, for the first time, that this girl behind the counter wasn't the enemy. She was someone who had once waited for a parent who didn't come. The woman left without another word, but as she walked out, she glanced back just once and nodded. Reema stood behind the counter, shaken but stronger. Kindness wasn't always easy. Sometimes it looked like conflict. Sometimes it looked like trouble. But it was worth it. The next day, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't sealed. Inside was a single card with a printed quote. "Sometimes the bridge you build for someone else is the one you end up walking across." Beneath it, in the familiar handwriting, were the words, "Ready for the next step." Reema looked around. The restaurant. Everything looked the same. The tables, the smell of spices, the worn-out floor near the register. But she had changed, and somewhere out there, Sundar was still watching. The quiet room, with no Namath College campus, didn't look like the movies. There were no massive buildings or ivy-covered walls. No wide-eyed freshmen taking selfies in matching sweatshirts. Instead, it was plain and honest. Beige walls, old benches with initials carved into them, a vending machine that ate coins without guilt. But to Reema, it might as well have been a palace. She walked through the narrow halls like she was holding her breath, half expecting someone to stop her and say, "Sorry, you don't belong here." But no one did. They just walked past her like she was already part of the place, and maybe she was. She had signed up for an evening design workshop. Nothing fancy, no credits, no certificates, just a pilot program that promised curious minds a space to think, to create, and most importantly to fail safely. The flyer had appeared, as always, pinned to the bulletin board in the restaurant by some invisible hand. She didn't question it anymore. Sundar's way of leaving signs had become part of her life now, like secret handshakes with the universe. The room itself was unmarked. No room number, no label, just a slightly ajar door with a paper taped to it that said, "Enter if you're ready to bill." Inside, the space felt alive. Not loud, not crowded, but pulsing with the quiet energy of people who didn't fit into traditional classrooms. Some were older, some younger. Some had laptops held together with duct tape. Some drew with broken pencils on the backs of receipts. But they all had the same thing in their eyes: hunger. Not the kind you feel in your stomach, the kind you feel in your bones. The instructor was a man named Darius. He didn't introduce himself with a speech or a bio. He just looked around the room and said, "Everyone here has something to say. You don't need a loud voice, just an honest one." Reema sat near the back, unsure if she belonged. She hadn't touched real art since high school, when her sketchbook was her best friend. Life had a way of making you put down the things you loved when survival got louder. But halfway through the session, Darius handed out a challenge. Draw something you've never told anyone. At first, the room stayed silent. Their pens moved, eyes lowered. Reema hesitated, then began sketching. What came out surprised her. She drew a bridge, not a perfect one. It looked rough, patched with boards of different sizes, nails sticking out, ropes barely holding. But on one end stood a girl, small and scared, and on the other, nothing, just fog. Darius stopped behind her, looking down quietly. "That's not a mistake," he said. "That's the truth." Reema looked up, startled. "You're not just building it for you," he said. "You're hoping someone's waiting on the other side." She didn't reply. Her throat tightened. He walked on. That night, she left the building late. The air was crisp, and her breath curled in little clouds. As she stepped outside, she saw it. Not a person this time, but a small envelope taped to the side of a lamppost. No name, no address. Inside, folded carefully, was a single photo, a black and white image of a young boy standing barefoot on a dirt path, holding a broken cricket bat. The caption on the back, scribbled in the same steady handwriting, read, "This was me." No one expected much. Below it, just two more words, "Build anyway." Reema didn't sleep much that night. Her dreams were filled with shadows and bridges and faces that didn't have names yet. Something had shifted. Sundar wasn't just watching now. He was sharing, and not just his influence, his story. But stories come with weight, and not everyone carries it the same way. At the restaurant, things had started to change again. Customers were asking for Reema by name. Someone had posted about her kindness online, and now people came in just to meet the girl with the bridge sketch. Some wanted selfies. Some asked for advice. One woman even cried in her arms, saying, "You reminded me it's okay to start over." It was beautiful, but it was exhausting. One evening, she stayed after closing to wipe down the tables. She moved slower than usual. Her feet ached. Her back hurt. But more than that, her heart felt tired, like it was stretching in too many directions. As she turned off the last light, she saw a note slipped under the door. This one didn't say much. Just 3 lines. "Don't burn out to keep others warm. Rest is not retreat. Even bridges need time to dry." She sank into a chair, the note pressed against her chest. It was like Sundar knew the parts of her she hadn't admitted to herself yet, like he was guiding her without ever getting in the way. But life, as it always does, was about to throw something bigger, something that would test everything she had learned. Because 2 days later, a man in a suit walked into the restaurant, not for lunch, not for tea, but with a proposition and a contract. The contract that smelled like smoke. The man in the suit had teeth too white to trust. That was Reema's first thought. The second thought came slower, heavier. Why is he asking for me by name? It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon, the kind where the restaurant hummed at half speed, sunlight dripping lazily through the blinds. The man walked in like he owned time, polished shoes, expensive cologne, the kind of face that had never waited in line or cleaned up someone else's spill. He sat at a corner table, crossed one leg over the other, and opened a leather briefcase with the kind of confidence people rented in expensive leadership seminars. When Reema approached, he looked up, not at her, but through her, like she was a file in a folder, something to be managed. "You're Reema, right?" he asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. She nodded, uneasy. "Yeah, that's me." "Great. I represent a Foundation Future Pathways initiative. We've been watching your story. Very inspiring. Kindness, ambition, mystery, benefactor. It's a great arc." She didn't know what to say. It felt like he was selling her something she already owned. He pulled out a crisp document and slid it across the table, like a magician revealing the final card in a trick. "We'd like to sponsor you. Full scholarship to an elite design school in New York. Housing, equipment, exposure. Plus, we'll document your journey, interviews, maybe even a short docuseries. People love real-life underdog stories, especially ones that go viral." Reema blinked. It felt like a trap wrapped in flattery. "Why me?" He chuckled, tapping the contract. "You're marketable, authentic, and most importantly, unknown. Everyone loves discovering the next big thing, and we'd like to help you become that." He said the word help like it had a price. Tag. Her Reema didn't touch the contract. Her fingers hovered above the paper, but refused to land. Everything she had worked toward was right there, glittering, glamorous, just one signature away. But it didn't feel like her bridge. It felt like someone else's bridge with her name painted on the side. "Do I get to say no to interviews?" she asked. He paused. "It's discouraged. Do I get to choose what stories get told?" He blinked. "Slower this time. We shape the narrative. It's part of the process." Her heart started thudding. This wasn't a gift. It was a transaction. And suddenly, she remembered Sundar's words. "This is not a gift. It's a bridge. A bridge doesn't trap you. It carries you." She stood up. "I need time," she said. He didn't stop her, just smiled, as if he already knew she'd come back. But she wasn't so sure. That night, the sky over Mountain View turned a deep indigo, and the stars looked like pinholes in a velvet curtain. Reema sat on the rooftop of her apartment building, wrapped in a blanket, the contract still in her bag. She didn't take it out. Instead, she stared at the horizon. searching for answers that never arrived all at once, until she noticed something strange taped to the water tank down a plain white envelope. She didn't even act surprised anymore. Inside was a tiny sketch, hand-drawn, to bridges side by side, one wide, paved, full of spotlights and banners. The other, narrow and worn, made of mismatched planks, but with something glowing faintly at the end. Underneath it, a message. One will make you see. The other will help you see. Choose with both eyes open. She didn't sleep that night, but in the morning, she made her choice. She returned to the restaurant, contract still unsigned, and found Mr. Canna polishing silverware with more focus than necessary. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. He glanced up, curious, about the man in the suit. She nodded. Double quotes. "I said no," she whispered. "I think I need to build something on my terms, even if it's slower." He didn't say anything, didn't need to. He just gave her the kind of nod old people give when you finally understand something they've known for decades, and as if the universe had been holding its breath. The very next moment changed everything again. The restaurant phone rang. Mr. Canna answered it. Out of habit, his eyebrows lifted. "She's here," he said into the receiver. Then, to Reema, "It's for you." She took the phone. Confused. "Hello," a familiar voice answered, calm and gentle. "This is Sundar." Her knees nearly gave out. He continued, not rushing. "I've been watching from a distance, but distance only goes so far. If you're ready, I'd like to meet, properly, no hoodies, no mystery." She couldn't breathe. "Why now?" "Because," he said, "you just passed the test." And it wasn't about design. It was about knowing when to say no. He gave her an address, and when she showed up, what she found wasn't an office. It was a garage. The kind legends begin in. The garage with windows to the futurette garage sat quietly on the edge of town, surrounded by lemon trees and silence. It looked like every other garage in California. Faded paint, stubborn hinges, a door that had seen more than its share of winters. But Reema knew the truth before she even stepped inside. This was the kind of space where beginnings outgrew the smallness of their origin, where stories took their first uncertain breath, where a man named Sundar once sat with nothing but ideas, and a desk fan that squeaked when it turned. She hesitated at the threshold, unsure if she should knock. It didn't feel like the kind of door you knocked on. It felt like the kind you walked through when you were finally ready. So she stepped inside. It was cooler than she expected. Light filtered in through a single dusty window. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with tools, papers, odd wires, and a faded photo of a young Sundar standing next to a desktop computer the size of a microwave. He was already there. No fanfare, no entourage. Just him in a soft blue shirt and simple sneakers, standing over a table scattered with sketches and circuit boards. He looked up, and the smile he gave her was the same one he had worn that rainy afternoon so many weeks ago in the restaurant. Calm, kind, curious. "You found the place," he said. Reema nodded, still catching her breath. "I didn't think it would be here." "Neither did I," he replied, chuckling. "But I've learned that sometimes, to go forward, we have to return to where we began, not to stay there but to remember." She looked around. "You worked here for a while," he said, "before meetings, before microphones, when it was just ideas and doubt." She stepped closer, her eyes catching on a small corkboard filled with scribbled quotes, most half-finished. One said, "The future is often hidden behind the simplest doors." He gestured for her to sit on a stool. "You said no to something tempting, something shiny. That's hard to do when you've been without. You chose authenticity. I needed to see that." She lowered her gaze. "I didn't want to become someone else's product." He nodded. "And now, you won't have to." He pulled a folder from the table and placed it in front of her. Inside were blueprints, messy, handwritten notes, sketches, prototypes, and at the top a logo. Not for Google, not for any company. She recognized it was for something new. Bridge Project, it said. "This," Sundar said, "is what comes next." He explained slowly, deliberately. He was building a platform, part design incubator, part mentorship network for students from overlooked communities, kids who couldn't afford fancy portfolios or had never even met someone in tech. He didn't want to run it alone. He wanted her to co-create it, not as a figurehead. He said, as a builder, from the ground up, your stories, your ideas, your rules. Reema didn't respond for a long time. Her mind was racing, not with fear but with possibility. Her heart wasn't just pounding anymore, it was expanding. I'm not qualified, she finally whispered. He raised an eyebrow. You're human, you're hungry, you've failed, you've stood back up. That's more qualification than most. The words wrapped around her like a safety net. Will people even listen to me? She asked. He smiled. They already are. The garage faded away in her mind then. In its place, she saw classrooms lit by curiosity, Zoom calls filled with laughter and ideas. Kids drawing their lives into code and color. She saw herself teaching, guiding, still learning, always learning, not above anyone, just beside them, like Sundar had done with her. Weeks passed, then months, and Reema didn't just join the bridge project, she helped shape it. They launched small, a pilot program in a few cities, then a pop-up workshop in a library basement, then a webinar with 200 viewers, then thousands. The growth was slow, but it was real. No fame, no filters, just honest work and people who believed in doing things differently. And Sundar, he stayed in the background, as always, never stealing the spotlight, never needing the credit. But sometimes, after a big event or a tough decision, a small envelope would arrive at her desk. No name, just a line like, "Quiet leaders build loud futures." Or you walked across the bridge, now you are the bridge. One day, she stood in front of a room full of students, telling her story, not the viral version, not the headline version, the real one. She talked about the restaurant, the napkins, the fear, the fork in the road moments, the contract she didn't sign. And when she finished, a boy in the back raised his hand. "Why do you think he chose you?" he asked. She paused, thinking. Then said softly, "Maybe because I wasn't trying to be chosen." And in that moment, in the quiet between their breaths, something clicked for all of them. The future wasn't waiting on a stage or behind a camera. It was here, now, in every small act of courage, in every kind choice made without witnesses, in every invisible seed planted by someone who believed, silently and stubbornly, in what the world could still become. And far away, in a different city, Sundar smiled as he watched the live stream, not because he had built something great, but because someone else had. The end.